Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm joined today by former CIA analyst Cindy Storer, and together with Cindy today, we'll talk about the hunt for Osama bin Laden that started in the 90s and ended, as we all know, in Pakistan in 2011. Thanks for your time, Cindy. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get to the questions specifically about this case, would you like to give me and my viewers some background about what you did at the CIA and specifically about tracking down Osama bin Laden, mostly in the 90s, if I remember well?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I was an analyst at the CIA, and in the mid-90s, I was sort of mid-career, and I was working on counterterrorism in the Counterterrorism Center. And we started following. People had been aware of bin Laden for a long time, but we started really concentrating on figuring out what his links were to international terrorism. Was he just financing? Was there a terrorist group? How did all these people fit together? And so I and the operations side worked closely together to try to fit together all those puzzle pieces and figure out what we had. And by mid-1996, I guess, we had figured out there was a terrorist group. And so we were the first to do that, as far as we know. And we just worked it from there. And so it was partly, obviously, knowing where bin Laden was at all times. But that was just a small thing. Understanding that there was an organization, how the organization worked, what their goals were, what their relationships were with other organizations and with governments, if there were any, what their capabilities were, what they wanted, and then later did more strategic work on, after 9/11, on how we think about Islamic terrorism and helping to frame that for policymakers to devise strategy. So it's the whole range from identifying one individual all the way up to, advising on strategy. So,
well, when did bin Laden fall into the CIA's radar?
As far as I'm aware, and I wasn't the first person on this, I think at least by 1982, believe it or not, people were already mentioning that he was there, was bringing money, that people were coming from the Middle East to help the Afghans. And there was already some concern about them because they didn't really like Westerners very much. And that was evident from the beginning.
Well, the CIA in the 90s also had to start a unit, if I remember well, called the Alex Station, aimed at tracking down bin Laden. How come they had to do something that big, like to start a unit specifically targeted on him?
Right. So if you want to really understand something in any bureaucracy, you have to start a dedicated effort. You have to have people actually focus on it. Otherwise, they're just doing it in their spare time, aside from all of their regular duties, right? So if you really want to get on top of an issue that's important, you have to create a dedicated unit to do it. And so in the beginning, it was just a couple of people, and then it became a unit. And then after the 98 bombings, it became more than one, and it's going to keep growing. And the reason was the first World Trade Center bombing, the attacks on our troops in Yemen and Somalia, the Black Hawk Down incident, and the attacks that were going on around the world all had these trails back to bin Laden and his associates in Pakistan. And so it became evident that we were really going to need to focus on this. And the key thing that happened, I think, was the plot in the Philippines known as the Bajinko plot, where Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others are planning to take down US airliners all in one day across the world. And I don't know if people remember from that time, but there was actually a day when all flights were canceled. And that was the reason. So that really got people's attention enough, I think, to want to focus more on the issue. As far as I know, there was a debate about how to do that. I don't really know what the deciding factors were in terms of creating a unit, because that unit first just focused on finances. It was an operational unit that focused on financing terrorism. But the head of the unit, Michael Scheuer, really just wanted to focus on bin Laden. That was his goal. And there were different views among intelligence agency leadership and politicians about what they wanted and why they did it. So I don't know. Of course, after the fact, everybody wants to claim credit, so it's hard to know now.
I didn't know about cancellations of flights either.
Yeah, there was a day or two where, American flights were canceled worldwide.
Wow, no, I didn't know that. I don't remember. I have no recollections of that. Well, while you guys were tracking down bin Laden, what intelligence techniques were you guys using? And what I mean here is, was it more based on technology or more on like human resources, human sources?
I love that. Thank you. And I love that you asked this question. Usually when I'm interviewed, people don't want to know how it was done. So this is great. We have to think about the different kinds of sources and information that we wanted at the time, and then how we were going to do our analysis. So it was a combination of what we call upsigant, of listening in on conversations and whatnot, and human sources, and a lot of open sources, interestingly enough. There've been Arab journalists who'd been traveling with bin Laden or, covering the war, and some American journalists and some British journalists and others who had been writing about it. And so they didn't provide information directly to the CIA, because we don't do that, but we read their stuff, right? And we were able to pick out information from everything that they had done, put that together with what we were getting from intercepting communications and from some human sources. We really didn't have a lot of human sources. Our entire stable, if you will, of Afghan assets was pretty much fired after the Soviets left Afghanistan, believe it or not. So we were kind of working in the dark. So we used our foreign partners a lot. We worked together with our foreign partners a lot. And that's how, once focus was established on bin Laden, that's how we came to understand the organization so quickly, was because we worked with people all over the world who were arresting these guys who were bombing things everywhere. They were picking up their computers and their documents and all of that and sharing that information with us. And so that's how that helped us put together with our other sources and figure out what was going on. Without those partnerships, I think it would have taken us so much longer.
Well, but back then you didn't have no internet and computers were not as widespread as they are today. So how did you guys piece together the information you were getting?
Yeah, that was the hard part, right? So I had Microsoft Word, an early version, and I had Microsoft Excel, which did not like text at all. So when you tried to put information in Excel and you tried to use it to make matrices with words, it would sometimes just randomly erase all of your information. And yeah, we didn't really have any databases in the sense of I can pick out information and code it and put it in the database. Didn't have that capability. We didn't have Analyst Notebook at first. Analyst Notebook allows you to create social network diagrams. We didn't have that at all to begin with. And when we finally got it, everything had to be hand done. So everything had to be loaded by hand. Now, our one advantage was the CIA had developed a fantastic database for all of the information that came into the agency. Human, SIGINT, all sources, really. Press, that was, we had various agreements. And so I was able to search that database and to create, at the time we called them profiles, so that I would get information that I thought I needed. And so that's how we sort of read the Daily Mail, if you will, and were able to search this enormous database for information that may not have come to us. But then there were also permission issues. So it's a brilliant database. It's set up so that you can only see the things that you're allowed to see. So if you get a sense that there's something else you need to see, then you have to ask for permission. And so we were constantly doing that. And then I think you'll enjoy this story. Do you remember Lotus Notes?
Of course I do, yes. I don't have very good memories of it, but I do.
No,
yeah.
No one does. But it was our first email service, right? I mean, it's the first thing we had, so it was better than nothing. And I had no way to store documents that I knew I was going to need, but it would be very hard to find them again. So I started putting them in a folder in Lotus Notes, like a folder in my email, right? Well, that got to be pretty darn big. So they kept trying to get me to archive all of that information. I kept telling them, no, I can't do that because I'm trying to save us all from terrorists. I can't let go of any of this information. And finally, I got a notice and I said, no, I will not archive any of this information. Please understand, these people are trying to kill us. And so the agency did a great thing. They just bought more servers. And from that point, I worked with our technology people as the subject matter expert, working with our technology people to help develop the kinds of things that I needed in order to continue to do my work. So I started to be able to store this information. It's hard to get back to. And then the thing I think is so important for people to understand is that when you do something like this, you have to ask a good question. So I teach intelligence analysis now. So you have to make sure that you ask the right questions. And then you have to allow yourself to use models and frameworks and test those against the information you have coming in. And then also, so inductive and deductive and put together, and it's called abductive reasoning. So that's what we did. You would create charts and have files of names trying to figure out who people were and events and chronologies, all done by hand, all in Word, all in Microsoft Word, files after files after files, and create new files every time you found a new thread. And then the base way to keep all of it was just a chronology, get everything in time order. It's still amazing to me how people get things wrong because they get the time order out of place and they assign cause to something that can't possibly be the cause. And it happens all the time. And it's one of the things people do with conspiracy theories, actually, is they get the time sequence wrong.
Well, how does it work even today when you have to piece together things such as information you get from the spies or from undercover people or from sources you develop on the ground and the technology? How do you guys group this and connect the dots?
How do we connect the dots? So again, having methods to do that is very important. I developed for myself a method to keep track of my sources, to display things visually in ways that would give you information or knowledge that you didn't already have. So that's where social network diagrams are so important, how people are linked together, people and events and phone numbers and whatever, how that's all linked together. And then you watch processes happen. You do process diagrams. Okay, how do they transfer money from one place to another? How did this happen? And you get lots and lots of cases of that. And then you get lots and lots of cases of people ordering somebody else to do something. And then you start to be able to figure out a hierarchy. And then if you ask yourself the question, is there a hierarchy? Let me go and see if there's information that would support that hypothesis. Then you can start to make some preliminary conclusions or suppositions that there actually is a hierarchy. Without asking that question, and most people didn't, it just looks like a big mess. You have to actually ask the right questions. And then, of course, you have to test the information so you're not just confirmation bias, you're not just seeing what you want to see, but you're actually testing the information. You go out and you collect more information. You see if that fits various models that you've developed or you have in your head. And that's how you figure it out. And that's how I had this eureka moment one day when I'd been looking at financial transactions and orders going through from people in various places and how they talked about having offices and furniture and light items on their budget and all this other stuff. And I'd taken organizational theory and it just clicked. I'm like, this is a bureaucracy. How can this be anything else? And so from that point, then I was able to ask questions like, okay, if this is a bureaucracy of a sort, then I should have somebody in this position. So then I go back to my people who are doing the collection and say, okay, can we find out if there's somebody who does this job? And eventually we were able to put it all together.
What's the closest you guys got to getting bin Laden before 9/11?
That is a good question. And honestly, I don't know because we never tried.
Okay.
As far as I know, we never tried. I wasn't involved in that. I think something that people need to understand is the complications involved in that. One was, can we trust the people we have on the ground, our Afghan allies and others, to do the job in a way that's not going to be messy and get a lot of people killed and all that sort of thing, and not back out at the last minute because stuff goes wrong. If we succeed, how are other countries going to view that? It has impact on that international relations. And before 1998, before the bombings in Africa, certainly, I don't think anybody in the world would have really understood why we engaged in an operation to seize this prominent Saudi who'd helped the Afghans against the Soviets. That probably wouldn't have played well. Not to mention which, if the operation went wrong, we knew that their families met in the mosque, and their families, their kids, their people all over the compound. So you're looking at possible harm to civilians, including children. That wouldn't have played well. Plus, it would have just been terrible. And so you have to have all these considerations. After the 98 bombings, though, and it was clear that they were targeting us, I would have thought we try to do something. And again, I wasn't directly involved in that side, so I couldn't tell you why those decisions were made. Politics, most likely.
Well, you already introduced what I would have asked next. Like at a certain point, Osama bin Laden declared war on America. Where did you guys understand that this guy was for real?
That is really good. And everybody didn't understand it all at once. As with any new issue, you always have your people who understand it first, and then some more, and then some more, and it grows, right? So we understood that there was an organization called al-Qaeda by the mid-90s, that they were a serious danger to us. But we didn't get a lot of additional resources. Then the bombings happened in 98. Then you have more buy-in from the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, George Tenet, who's also the head of our intelligence community, from other senior leaders, from analysts across the community. And some people had already been following this, or handfuls of people across our intelligence community who believed that this was a problem. So it just kind of grew over time in terms of the number of people who understood that this was a real issue. But even right before 9/11, I'll never forget this. We had people arguing over who was the biggest threat, where should we put our resources? Aren't these guys just lucky that they happened to get off a good attack against us in 98? They can't really be the kind of organization that you say they are. That was going on inside intelligence and outside intelligence. And, we weren't getting as many resources as we really need from Congress, although there were more. You have to get money from Congress. You have to get permissions from the White House. You can't just do things on your own because you want to. And so it took 9/11 really to get everyone on board.
Well, at a certain point, 9/11 happened because the intelligence failed, because there were things that were suggesting that these guys were studying, how to fly an airplane, and that they were up to no good, and they were trying to, also learn how to fight and things of the sort. How could intelligence fail up to the point of letting 9/11 happen?
So this is a hard issue. Okay, I'm not trying to pander here. This is something I teach my students.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly do we mean by failure? There's not really good definitions in the intelligence. Like, you're an engineer, you understand what failure means in an engineering aspect. But we don't really have those definitions in the intelligence world. So people just think about failure meaning whatever they want it to mean, basically. So what we have to do is look at it as a system, and parts of the system did fail, and then ask ourselves, why did those failures occur? So why were we unable to get more resources, to get more people on the issue? That's a leadership issue, and it's Congress. Actually, they controlled a lot of that. Why did the CIA and the FBI not share information better before 9/11? And there are legal and policy issues behind that can't be solved except at the presidential level. So you start to look at these things and you realize that there are parts of this intelligence system that it just wasn't set up to follow this kind of issue. It was set up to work against nation states. It wasn't set up to follow, James Bond chaos, kind of thing. And so it just didn't work for that. And things had to be restructured, and there needed to be new laws, and resources needed to be reallocated. And some of that happened before 9/11, but a lot of it didn't. Now, in terms of the analysis, why didn't the analysts put the pieces together? It's because, again, not all the information was being shared that needed to be shared in order to be able to do that. The people looking at the information were not allowed to physically talk to each other. I tried to talk to my counterpart in the FBI in New York, and all of my meetings were canceled behind my back. Right? So we did the best we could with the limitations that were placed on us. That's really all I can say.
Well, we know that one of the problems you just mentioned was communication between agencies, because there's this episodes that you mentioned, but we also have the Phoenix Memo here that is very famous.
Yeah, the Phoenix
Tries to
Memo.
warn. And also at the Alex station, one memo was blocked, was sent by FBI agent Doug Miller. And what I'm wondering here is, did communication between agencies change after 9/11? Did it get smoother, easier?
I think so. I think another thing that's important that I didn't mention is the impact of personalities. When you have a system that's not working and things aren't sort of set up right, then personalities kind of take over. And we had 3 strong leaders, CIA, FBI, and at the NSC, who were very strong personalities and didn't get along. So that doesn't help. But then after 9/11, by 2000, after 9/11, you can do whatever you want. I always tell my students, when the window of opportunity opens, drive a truck through it, because that's pretty much what we did, right? Just do whatever needs to be done. And then legislation and policy caught up with, okay, how do we need to reorganize things? How do we need to think differently about our laws in order to have the effect that we've had in these past couple of years after 9/11? And that was the legislation that was passed in 2004. It just takes, I don't know, it takes time. And the other thing that happened right away was that things that people had been proposing and requests that they had been making, all of a sudden are approved, right? Just kind of overnight. And again, that's typical human thing. You're rejected, and you have to prepare in the background, because eventually people are going to understand why you want it, and then you'll have a plan. And that's what we all did.
Well, after 9/11, how come it took 10 years to track him down and kill him? Because actually it took longer after 9/11, the period of time you guys have been trying to track him down before 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, before 9/11, we knew exactly where he was. That wasn't a problem. It's when he left Afghanistan, right, that it becomes an issue. And I don't know, again, I wasn't involved in that directly, but I will say something about manhunts in general. They're not easy. Especially when you have someone who is a group, an international organization, people who they've lived in that region for a long time. They have a lot of local contacts. It's difficult terrain. I mean, parts of the Hindu Kush weren't even mapped before 9/11. That's how, smuggling routes, and there are lots of ways of hiding in that society. So it's a difficult task at the best of times. And I can't speak to any specifics because I wasn't involved, but it seems like it should be easy. But when people are competent, they have a lot of resources, and they know the area better than you do, it's not that hard to hide, honestly.
And you also have to make sure you're not mistaking the person you're looking for with somebody else.
Absolutely. Thank you. Such a good point. You don't want to stage a raid on a compound and kill a bunch of people, and then you don't have the person that you came to get. And that sort of thing has happened in the past to various countries. And yeah, that's not good.
Well, it happened, for instance, with al-Zawahiri, that this guy was hiding in Kabul pretty much in plain sight, because he was just living in a condo in the downtown Kabul. And I could mention other cases like that of people hiding in plain sight when the law enforcement agencies are after them. For instance, even Italian mobster Matteo Messina Denaro. Do you see have you seen in your career many cases like this? How common is this?
I think, I mean, I can't say how common it is compared to what doesn't happen, right? But certainly Carlos the Jackals hid in plain sight for a very long time. We finally found him. Then it was a matter of negotiating to get him, right? It happens a lot. I think it's very difficult. And I know some other cases that I can't talk about where you think you know where this person is and you think it's the right person, but you're not sure enough to take the political and physical risks to get them. And so then it's an issue of, is there some way to limit their influence? Can we monitor them? There's all kinds of other questions you can ask of yourself. But it's not easy.
It's not. I agree. It happened with Osama bin Laden. They have to chase him for 10 years. And it happened with other terrorists as well. So it happens all the time.
It's all the time.
Well, Cindy, many thanks for your time. I think you gave us very precious information about this unique case, because there's nobody else in the world as dangerous as Osama bin Laden in the history of mankind, probably. So I think that discussing all, well, okay, no, I understand. We even had people who killed more people than Osama bin Laden, but probably in recent history. He was the deadliest man in recent history. So thanks a lot for the information that you gave us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I am the one who has to be thankful for having this opportunity. And thank you. Thanks everybody else for watching this, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.